this final portion will be just a time for community sharing. If anyone has reports about their experience, either tonight or throughout the week, or any reflections on the talk or the guidance, or anything that came up in your practice, or just general questions about anything that seems beneficial, feel free to share. Let us know. Norm.
Thank you, Peter, for your talk. And I've only shared as many times as I've come to the sits. I've only shared one other time. That was right after, I think it was, they had just started social distancing, and you were still sitting, but it wasn't being led. Margaret led the sit. So anyways, while we were sitting and meditating, many things went through my mind. But about your talk and how you talked about the sense of community at the Monastic Academy, and how everyone, it was how critical or how important it was to interact and have a sense of community. I'm the youngest of 10, and I live alone, and I have a very difficult time. Since I've retired, I've had a very difficult time interacting, even, like to go to funerals or go to weddings. I find myself wanting to withdraw and just isolate, but because of the 12-step program that I belong to, I try to pray and ask that when I go to an event, that I not be concerned about getting anything out of the event, anything pleasurable or anything rewarding. I mean, I try to go and to bring something. So, I ask questions of people and how they're doing. Just like the St. Francis prayer, try to understand more than try to be understood. Right. So anyways, that's what came to mind, and that, because lately I have been riding motorcycle with a group of motorcycle riders, and then I ride bicycle. Last weekend I rode with a group of 20 people, and I try to interact, but I find it just so challenging. Yeah, I'm not comfortable, in my own skin. So I'm trying harder than I ever have before, because I find myself wanting to isolate more. Right. And so I'm trying to push myself, but it's exhausting. I feel totally wiped out, tired, and so the other thing that came to mind is that the monks who gave up everything, and since I retired about 5 years ago, I've probably donated more, than I ever have to individuals who I find are in need, or to causes. But it's really, I live such a minimalist lifestyle. It's in many respects for what I'm capable of living. I don't spend any money on myself. I live in like this modest 1984 mobile home that is very comfortable. Right. It's been upgraded, but it's nothing compared to what I could live in. And I have a son who's a doctor. He just bought a house for $1.7 million, and that's in Hawaii. I spent 3 months with him. Oh, wow. And I never put a pair of shoes on the whole time I was there. I stayed in sandals the whole 3 months, but I felt a sense of purpose in helping him with his 2 children and his wife, and he has a good career. But I have another son here who has 20 employees, and he has more stuff than I can even ever imagine, you know.
Right.
But in you know, they both seem to be very comfortable in their own skin. In contrast to myself, trying, you know, to give and to live a minimalist lifestyle, to do the right thing. I haven't always. I know that, you know, in my younger years it was self-seeking to the extreme.
Right.
But it's not anymore. I think I'm honest. I think and I try to do the right thing. So, anyways, thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, that's really a great gift, hearing about where you're at and what you've been through. Could I ask though? It seemed like you're implying, but I'm curious. It sounds like you live in this modest home that could be. You have the resources to live in a much more extravagant home. It sounds like. Do you do that out of a sense of? If it seems more beneficial to live in a modest home, or is there some other reason that you're?
Yeah, right. I think, you know, I have a hard time going through the change. I'm out of touch with the real estate market. You know, I hear that the real estate market is just, you know, like people are coming in from out of state and buying real estate locally, sight unseen, and making offers higher than the asking price. Right. Because like there's a bidding war. Right. So that's one aspect of it. I just don't want to go through. I mean, moving is like, you know, torturous for me. But the other part of it is I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to live in a much nicer, bigger home and try to furnish it and be by myself. Right. Right. So that's one part of it as well. But I think when I first got divorced 22 years ago, I was living, you know, paycheck to paycheck after paying my child support and other expenses. I was living week to week. And so after 20 years, you know, I had a pretty good job, and my income increased and my expenses stayed the same because I never really spent extravagantly on anything. Right. So I think I had that fear of just barely making ends meet, and I've never really been able to just loosen the belt and spend money accordingly. I've always just kind of kept the financial spending to a minimum. Right. So. Yeah. Right. Thanks for willing to share all that and do that. You touched on a lot of good points, and I was asking that clarifying question about your home situation because it's interesting to me that a lot of people come, say, to Maple, and most or all the residents live in shared rooms, shared bedrooms. And I did that for many years, and there were small annoying things, like people are coming in when I'm already asleep and now I wake up or something, or I'm still sleeping and they get up 20 minutes before I'm going to get up, and that's a little annoying. But it was never that big of a deal. It was kind of nice. And I remember the times when there was no one in my bedroom because they all went home or something. And I actually kind of felt lonely and scared a little bit. And whereas, you know, before that, before I joined this place, ideally I wanted my own place and didn't, shared a lot of group houses, but there was a sense of like really wanting my own space. And it's interesting living in a community where that's still there, but not as much. And so, and the sense of the problem with owning things is that then you have to own it and take care of it and deal with it, as you said. Although I also share, I resonate with this sense of, I came from a very frugal background and financially supported myself starting in college. And so there was a sense of scarcity and, if I don't have enough money, I might not be able to fix my car or something. And so having to learn, am I indulging when I spend this money? Am I being frugal? Am I treating myself? What's my relationship with spending money, and am I doing this in beneficial ways or not?
And this question of community is very important to me because I didn't grow up with much of a community. And in my reading of modern history, there's been a movement over time of making things disconnected, of destroying connection. And we champion this and we call this individuality. We say that the upside is that we're individuals now. And we have a lot of rights, and we have a lot of freedom, and we have a lot of power and choice. I can live wherever I want, do basically almost anything I want. I'm not, my birth and my class and my family does not determine what job I can have, doesn't determine where I'm allowed to live, doesn't determine who I'm allowed to marry or who I'm allowed to be friends with. And so that's the history that we're told, and it's true. There's a lot of upsides to this movement of individual freedom and empowerment. But I think there's also a cost that people don't talk about, which is over time, all of the institutions and communities and communal structures have deteriorated, such that we have the lowest participation in civic organizations these days, that religious communities are shrinking, that families are oftentimes atomized and disconnected. We don't have large extended families, oftentimes, that we're close with, and even nuclear families are often broken apart for many, many reasons. And it's very easy for us to blame ourselves because we live in an individualistic culture, but you could also say it's a cultural and social problem, that the conditions are set up such that disconnection is such a valued and normal thing, and connection, as you said, is such a challenge, and you have to work at it. Whereas, say, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, we could take it for granted that we would be in connection whether we liked it or not. We relied on each other, so we had to be connected. Whereas now we have, you could say, the freedom and the power to not do that. And in fact, many of us in our culture hold that as the dream. As we've succeeded, if we have this ability to live anywhere, to not be tied down anywhere, to not be dependent on anyone or anything, we take that as a good thing. And again, there are benefits. There are definitely benefits to that. But I think there are also costs, and we need to design skillfully our own lives and ideally a community and a culture and a society so that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And so one way, say, that we're trying to address this is we have the monastic community. We come to the Sunday Sits. This was our original founding community when Soryu and the residents lived in this building. And so we really value those connections. And we're also trying to create, say, a village where people can build homes on the monastic grounds, don't have to do the grueling schedule that the residents do, but can still practice, be in connection, and it's taken for granted and assumed that we're all in connection. There's just scheduled meals, there's sits, there's activities, and everyone is in connection. And that's just the default rather than the thing that we have to make happen. So the goal for the village is creating the opportunity, and fortunately we have people that want to do this, that can build their own homes, can have gardens and fields and activities, and live in a community. Live in healthy community, live in trustworthy community that doesn't oppress or try to maximize taking resources from people, but create a culture that is connected, values honesty, values care, values growth, values compassion, values doing service to the world. And hopefully that model expands so that that is more normal rather than the exception, where right now there's just a bunch of individuals who are organized sometimes into parties and groups that are all fighting each other for the resources and winning. When right now, if any one group wins, it is at the cost of others, but soon that's not a sustainable model in a global, civilized time when there's too much power that if any one group wins, it hurts themselves. And so I empathize with this challenge, and I remember when I moved to new cities, how hard it was to make connections. It was a shock to me when I graduated college and I moved to another town and didn't really know anyone in that town, and I wondered, why didn't no one tell me that it's so challenging to make friends, to meet people? Why don't they teach that somehow or create something to make that more possible? I was in Washington, D.C., and apparently the answer for young, educated professionals was join a kickball league and drink and play kickball together. That was the default answer back then. I don't like drinking, I don't really like kickball, so that didn't work for me. Yeah. Although the Buddha also said, I would say, it's interesting, the Buddha said that the entirety of the spiritual path is friendship. Spiritual friendship, having wise, loving, caring companions who care about us, who can guide us, who can be a role model for us, who can be a friend to us. But he also said it's better to go it alone than to associate with bad companions. That if, say, I'm addicted to alcohol or drugs or gambling or something, whatever it is, it's better to go it alone than keep hanging out with people that are also doing that and are creating a community and culture of let's do this addictive behavior that is destructive. So in that case, it's better, the Buddha would say, to go it alone. In best case scenario, we can find at least one person who is wise and caring and can be a real friend to us. And to me, that's a huge challenge in these times. And there's one advice I consistently give people who come to our monastic academy. When they say, I'm leaving soon, do you have any pieces of advice of what I should do or something? I don't tell them to sit and I don't tell them to do service or anything. I say, it's really important if you can find, don't hang out with bad people. Don't go in groups that are just going to drag you down. And if you can, try to make at least one real connection with a real honest person. Value of one honest person is worth hundreds and thousands of dishonest people, or infinitely more. And if you can't do that, then do it online. If you can't do it online, then find a book. Better to have a good friend that's a book than a bad friend, I would say. So, which just speaks to what a weird time we live in, that I have to advise people to use books if they can't find community. So it's one reason that I'm so appreciative and so amazed at this community, the people who come to Sunday Sit, that I hear Soryu give talks and I think everyone's probably not going to show up next week because he just said all these things, and yet somehow people show up and in fact want more. So it's nice to have a group of people who aren't looking for the normal formula of tell me in 3 steps how I can just feel okay and not change my life or do anything different. It's nice to have a mature group that is asking these difficult questions and really exploring, to whatever extent it's possible and whatever extent it makes sense, how to live and navigate this world that's kind of topsy-turvy right now in a way that's beneficial, at the very least to ourselves. At the very least, the bar should be, is, am I living in a way that's beneficial for myself, and then let alone for others in the world. So I really appreciate you sharing about this challenge of community. It's a real challenge, and we've been trying to figure that out just internally amongst ourselves, and then increasingly how to do outreach into the community again. And ideally get to the point where we have teachers and centers throughout the world, so that there's some home base that people can go to that they know exists. That's really important. And the sense of generous giving and making a real change in your life, going from self-centeredness, from maybe the hedonistic way that everyone told me is the way to do things, and then exploring, maybe trying to actually hear someone is the way to feel heard. Maybe the way to be understood is to really understand someone else. Maybe the way to feel love is to really love someone else first. Maybe the way to be bountiful is to be generous. And to some extent that's a leap of faith when that's a new behavior, new action, new way of being in our life. So it's very courageous and vulnerable to take that leap of faith and do that. And hopefully, as the second guided meditation showed, oftentimes we don't make that leap of faith until we have to, or there's enough pain or suffering that we're willing to try something different because the old ways aren't working well for us. So these are a lot of things I heard from you. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth or speaking for you in a way that's not representing your experience. But I was very touched by hearing everything. Maybe just one last question or share, or report, anything?
I've heard story say a few times in a few different ways that you have an infinite supply of garbage in your heart, and I imagine he's kind of referring to like aeons of lifetimes of eating and being eaten, that kind of thing. I've been feeling how true that is. Like, I feel like I could spend my entire life working on my trauma and never come to the end of it. So this kind of like big open question you can do whatever you want with. It's like, how do you know when to just like cut it off and say, not that you would cut it off forever, but in practice, in the overarching story of it over years, is there a point at which you're like, you've done a lot of work on the trauma and it's just time to focus on getting into samadhi and breaking through and whatnot?
It's a very deep question. It's a very deep question. I mean, so an easy answer from one perspective, not to say it's the answer, but one answer from a certain perspective is, yeah, go into samadhi, go into concentration right now and break through as soon as possible. That's always the right answer. From a certain perspective. We don't have any guarantee that I'll be alive in an hour or tomorrow or a week from now. There's no guarantee that I'll have the opportunity to practice again. And as long as I'm always waiting for a better moment, waiting for a better group, waiting for a better weather, waiting for a better state of mind or better body, then it will never happen, because I'm always waiting for the right moment. And it's interesting to me that if I look at the stories of the awakened people, the people that have really deep practice, who've really demonstrated in their life a deep change, a lot of them correlate very highly with either facing death or sickness or grief and loss, where they just didn't have a choice anymore and they just had to do it. All the options seemed either hopeless or gone or not available or whatever. So from a certain perspective, the fierce answer is, yeah, right now. Do it right now. There's no time but right now. There's literally no time but right now. So you have to do it right now, or else it'll never happen. And that is kind of the mental attitude that is, I would say, if not the most, then one of the most conducive to actually entering deep meditation. Is just, we had someone recently come and do a long cabin retreat on our property. Her name's Seishin now, and she used to go by Yasna. And she said something like, my goal was impossible, my assignment was impossible, and yet I had to do it somehow. And that's the attitude we can go into our practices. This is impossible, and yet I gotta do it somehow. I just gotta do it. I can't rush it, and I can't wait. I just gotta do what I can do right now, because I have to do it. So from a certain perspective, that's good. From another perspective, healing your trauma, healing your karma, working on our character, working on our virtue, working on our ethics, working on our actions, becoming more skilled and beneficial, more cleared out, recycling, throwing away all that garbage in our heart. That is a work that we can do and should do and must do for the rest of our lives, from another point of view. Even if someone, say, gets awakened or gets enlightened or enters deep meditation, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be effective, that they can actually do things in the world very skillfully. And it doesn't guarantee that they're not going to cause harm or something. That they can ignorantly, inadvertently still cause harm. And so, and they're depending, if they're fully a Buddha, then yeah, it's impossible to do harm. But in these other awakening and deep experiences, it's still possible for their old habits to take over and bad delusions to seep in and stuff. So this work of trauma healing and becoming more ethical and character development, from another perspective, that never ends and this person shouldn't ever stop doing that. But based on conditions and circumstances, a person might focus more on throwing themselves into practice, and based on conditions and circumstances, at other times, they might focus more on character development or trauma healing. And ultimately, these two, from an ultimate point of view, these two aren't in conflict, aren't opposites, aren't degrading each other or something. And I guess the test to me would be, are you willing to do one and you're not willing to do another one? Some people come to the center and they just want to meditate. They don't want to do responsibility. They don't understand why relationships matter. They don't understand about service. And to me, that means you're willing to do one, but you're not willing to do the other one. And other people want to do trauma healing, want to do relational stuff, want to cook food and stuff, but they don't want to do practice. They want to really throw themselves in. And it's not so much whether or not they can. There's another level of competency and skill and all that. But the more rude question is the person willing to do both? Now, whether or not a person is actually skilled or equipped to do both, that's another question. And so not everyone should necessarily be at the monastery, because it might not be the best thing for them right now. But if they are there and they are equipped, the question is, are they willing? And if we're not really willing, like Norm is sharing, to really make a radical change and try something different, then that might be the next trauma to heal. Why am I not willing to do this?